Hello. My name is Aubrey Young-Escobedo, and today I'm going to be sharing with you my application of theory and therapeutic modalities. So, to get started, just let's talk about our client background and story. So, here's the situation. You are a brand new school social worker at Apple Elementary. You were assigned to work with Ken, an 11-year-old boy in the sixth grade. Ken was referred to by his teacher, Mrs. Orange, because of his behavior in class. According to Mrs. Orange, Ken has been falling behind in class, even with the help he's been receiving from the special ed teacher according to his IEP plan. He's also been verbally beating himself up, experiencing panic attacks, and in some cases hitting his head against the wall when met with a new assignment or task, which typically happens in each subject. When Mrs. Orange asks Ken why he does this, Ken tells her it's because he's too stupid or the dumbest kid in class, so why even try? Mrs. Orange feels like this is beyond her scope of practice and can't personally attend to Ken, as she has to manage all 29 of her other students. Before meeting with Ken, you request his file from the special education teacher. You notice that Ken has been diagnosed with ADHD by his pediatrician. You also see some notes that his parents are overall skeptical of mental health, but ultimately want their son to succeed. You contact Ken's parents and request to start meeting with Ken to work on building skills that would help him feel more confident in the classroom. Ken's parents agree, and you set up your first meeting with Ken. So that's kind of our story and background. The first modality that I chose was cognitive behavioral therapy. This is a very common one used in school social work, and honestly, I can see why. Three core concepts of cognitive behavioral therapy. Concept one is that the client possesses the ability to become aware of their own thoughts and cognitive distortions, and they can change them. So they're aware of just kind of what's going on in their own head, their thought process, and they have the ability to change them. Concept two, thoughts perceived by the client that are triggered by an environment or stimulus can inaccurately reflect reality. So basically, just the idea that just because the client perceives something one way doesn't mean that's actually what's going on. And then concept three, new situations need to either be assimilated and made to fit our way of thinking or accommodated by changing the situation to better incorporate it into our way of thinking. Otherwise, problem behavior will arise. So we either have to fit the situation to fit our understanding of the world, or we have to find a way to change our thinking to fit our understanding of the world. All right, so strengths and vulnerabilities of using this with Ken. So some strengths of using CBT with Ken. We can identify a reason why Ken is behaving this way. He's experiencing cognitive distortions. He feels that he is stupid or the dumbest kid in class. He feels very overwhelmed. Ken can build better coping skills to replace his current, less efficient ones. And Ken can also build self-awareness using the ABC method. And then some vulnerabilities with using CBT with Ken. Ken is also 11. Most 11-year-olds are fairly intelligent, but sometimes modalities like CBT can be very kind of fluffy and jargony if it's not done well. So implementing that can prove difficult. He also has ADHD, a neurodevelopmental disorder. So keeping his interest and motivation to change his situation could also prove difficult through no fault of his own. Interventions that are appropriate to using CBT. So intervention one, monitoring covert and overt self-talk. So this intention can help target Ken's negative self-talk. One way we can do this can be put into like a practical intervention is this really cool. It's called like it's a little blurry. It's called the Angry Birds Truth Bomb game. I saw a therapist that I shadowed use this with kids, and so basically what it is it's a CBT game for kids to kind of keep them engaged. So this is kind of what it says. It says Angry Birds Truth Bomb is a card game to help kids learn basic cognitive behavioral skills to stop intrusive thoughts with thought stopping and replacement skills. Kids will also learn to challenge thoughts to replace negative thoughts with positive alternatives. The pigs represent negative self-talk, and angry birds represent positive thoughts to defeat the negative self-talk statements. So, this is a kid that I know that I've worked with, and I would love to play this game with him one day. I think this would be a really great intervention for him. He talks very negatively about himself, and he struggles to stay engaged. So I think, and he loves video games. So I think this would be a perfect way to kind of keep him engaged. Intervention two, cognitive restructuring. So running through the ABC method, right? Identify the activating event, identify what beliefs that ensues, and then the consequences, right? So we might review with him. The activating event is you have a piece, like an assignment, a piece of paper put in front of you. You believe that you are too stupid to complete it, therefore it doesn't get done, and you feel worse about yourself, right? So if we could find a way to help him restructure and understand that, hey, this may be difficult, but I am not stupid and I can figure it out, right? Intervention three, dialectical behavior therapy group. This is not, obviously, this is DBT, not CBT, but a lot of people do consider it a CBT method, and they go hand in hand. I would definitely enroll Ken in a group like this. Research shows that when children receive DBT therapy that is structured with children in mind, coping skills that are taught through play, they can build stronger coping skills. And I think just kind of seeing how Ken reacts when he is met with schoolwork, having some coping skills to help keep himself regulated would be very beneficial for Ken. Um, okay, so moving on to modality two. Gestalt therapy, three core concepts, okay? So, concept number one, phenomenological perspective. So, challenges the way of the client's thinking by identifying what is subjectively felt versus what is objectively observed. So, you're working with the client to say, okay, so what do I feel? And then what can I observe objectively? And where do those two things overlap? So concept two is figure formation existential process. So learning how the client interprets their world and helping them identify ways to be their authentic self, as well as realizing what's in their control and what is not in their control. And then concept number three, we've got or organismic self-regulation. When our mind and body have a need, we'll do our best to fulfill that need. This principle encourages the client to become aware of our body and mind's natural response to fulfilling a need and tweaking or changing it to a more helpful response, or simply put, we are aware and acknowledge it, right? So moving on. Okay, so strengths and vulnerabilities of using Gestalt therapy with Ken. So strengths, it can build upon Ken's already present self-regulation techniques. Although they may not be good, we can identify parts of them and help him build on what he does have, right? That may not be bad at all, and help him build on that to create better self-regulation. We can challenge his current way of thinking about himself and help him feel grounded in reality and that he isn't stupid. Maybe there's just other barriers, or maybe it's just he doesn't believe in himself, right? Ken can realize what is in his control, which can in turn help him feel like his situation is more manageable. So vulnerabilities to using Gestalt therapy with Ken. Most of Ken's self-regulation techniques are very shame-based, so it may be challenging to build on what is natural. Ken may in turn feel like nothing is in his control. He might feel more hopeless, and again, he has an ADHD diagnosis, and considering his age as well, he may struggle to grasp some of these concepts if they're not explained in a way that a child would understand them. So intervention one, I took from a video on psychotherapy.net. It's very similar to the empty chair technique that we see a lot with Gestalt therapy, but it is done with clay figures. So this is an exercise similar to the empty chair. It's more child-centered. Ken will create out of clay different everyday figures in his life that he feels make him feel stupid, and he will confront them. Or alternatively, we could have him create two different versions of himself, the one that he wants to be and the one he doesn't want to be, and have him confront or talk to them. So again, this just kind of will depend on the flow of conversation, but the point is that Ken can kind of verbally express maybe how he feels about his situation and other people involved in his situation without any consequences, right? Um, of him getting in trouble for speaking out or expressing his feelings. Intervention number two, the exaggeration exercise. So this is another Gestalt therapy technique. So this is when we notice an exaggerated gesture performed by the client that usually has an intense emotion attached to it. For this exercise, you may let Ken know you're going so we're going to let him know we're going to do an exercise. Tell him you're going to put a new assignment in front of him and have him react as he normally would. Have him pay attention to how he feels and how he moves. Then have him perform the opposite when the assignment is placed in front of him and see how he feels. So if you put an assignment in front of him, he starts to feel stupid. He starts to kind of close in on himself and get really, just hands on his head. Have him, be like, okay, what if we put an assignment in front of you and let's say we're here, we're going to do the opposite. Go into some kind of power pose, right? So just kind of helping him realize how he feels in certain situations and presenting the opposite, right, as an option. Okay. Multicultural considerations of diversity, equity, and inclusion in CBT. So looking at their CBT modality, so a multicultural lens critique of CBT can, again, I know this kid, he comes from a family with a lower socioeconomic background. CBT is very structured, and sometimes it can have like fluffy jargon that is, if not explained properly, may not make sense to a child. It also just may not seem practical for someone who has a background and may kind of just seem like, well, maybe I want something that's a little bit more like solution focused, right? Um, just kind of knowing him and his background. So it doesn't really take that in mind. And then CBT and DEI, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion. Just kind of to go into this further, I found a research article that was conducted around the use of CBT in Brazil. And it found it mostly ineffective because it's a very Western concept and created by the typical rich white male, right? Whereas Brazil's culture is more warm and family centered, not very structure oriented in conversation. So it only worked when the therapist adapted CBT to fit the culture instead of strictly following CBT protocol. And then, as far as multicultural strengths of CBT, again, it works very well with Western clients and clients whose cultures revolve around structure. So that same research article said it was very effective in East Asia and countries like Japan and China, but not in countries that are more like Brazil, where that is not necessarily the focus of conversation or culture. So yeah, that's one of the weaknesses. Doesn't work well with warm, informal cultures. So multicultural considerations and issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion with Gestalt therapy. So a multicultural lens critique with Gestalt, he's a younger child. A lot of Gestalt work is built for adults, like chair work and confrontation. Although there are resources available for children, like the one I use, it doesn't apply the easiest across all ages. And sometimes it doesn't even work the best with like geriatric populations. Sometimes it works very well with geriatric populations, but it is mostly kind of built for adults for the most part. So Gestalt and DEI, Gestalt, although it's originally a Western concept, kind of when I was researching this, I found that there is a lot of research that supports that it is very effective with when working with diverse populations across ethnicity, and gender. Although if the clinician doesn't implement Gestalt therapy with this kind of multicultural lens and kind of bends it a little bit, it's firmly just a protocol, then again, it's not going to be as effective on kind of with diverse populations, right? So strengths, very adaptable to any culture. Weakness, doesn't work well across all ages and can be ineffective with diverse populations if the therapist is too rigid according to research. So personal application. So CBT, one thing I enjoy about CBT is the concept of cognitive distortions and cognitive restructuring. A lot of people, they go through these cognitive distortions, and a lot of it can stem from insecurities, which stems from the way that we think about ourselves. So if we're able to put a name to the way that we think about ourselves, like a cognitive distortion, it can help us rebuild a positive image of ourselves and our capabilities. Positive self-image can also help a client in other aspects of their lives and even their health. Um, Gestalt therapy, one reason I really appreciate Gestalt therapy as a modality is that it's all about confrontation and catharsis. So I think a lot of why clients can feel stuck, especially when you're dealing with relationships with others or themselves, is because they don't feel like they have a safe space to say what needs to be said. And Gestalt therapy kind of provides a low stakes opportunity for them to release that through things like the empty chair or, you know, kind of that gesture exercise we went through. Um, and allowing for kind of this cathartic release can also help clients feel like they can set boundaries kind of in more real life situations. And it allows them to let go of things that they don't necessarily want to be holding on to. So these are my references. Have 2 pages of those. And thank you for coming to my presentation. One thing I did want to mention is Ken is obviously not the real name of this child. I did change his name, his teacher's name, and his school name. Just wanted to make sure that was all clear. But thank you for listening to my presentation.